Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone can hear me. Wayne, now you're too close. Yeah. I have the opportunity to have two speakers for our cocktail hour. Feel free to grab a drink, but I'm going to ask everybody to quiet down a little bit. We've got two really great speakers who will be speaking briefly for 10 minutes each. Right here. It's my pleasure to introduce Peter Theroux, who will be discussing in Obscura adventures in the world of intelligence. Peter's an accomplished author, translator, and former intelligence officer who served for over 20 years in the U.S. government, specializing in counterterrorism. If everyone will please be quiet. Thank you. His service earned him the CIA's Career Intelligence Medal, recognizing a career of deep expertise and impact. His latest book, In Obscura, Adventures in the World of Intelligence, has drawn praise for its candor, insight, and literary grace. Daniel Pipes, founder of the organization, called it a brilliant, elegantly written account of what it's like to live a life in the shadows, noting that Theroux's prose sparkles with wit and rare honesty, as he recounts the intellectual and moral complexities of intelligence work in the post-9/11 world. Please give him a warm welcome to Peter Theroux.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I will be pretty brief. Hey, as my second grade teacher sister used to tell her class, this is your turn to listen. Anyway, sorry. I'm not going to talk about my book, which is only part one of a book. I cannot write the second half yet, but it might be out next year. I'm going to talk for maybe 10 to 15 minutes. I had asked Greg about what might be of interest, and he said more or less the intersection of intelligence and policy. So I have basically 2 points. One of them addresses the implications of flawed thinking when policy and intelligence don't completely match up. Also, we heard, I think, from Michael Rubin today how think tankers can tend to look at the trees and miss the forest. So my forest here is the Asian continent, not so far from what we're talking about because Israel, Lebanon, Hamas, and the rest are also on the Asian continent. So the starting point of my first topic here is the pullout from Afghanistan in the summer of 2021, because it was a debacle. And it so I spent 25 years as an analyst, targeter, and other things in a notorious three-letter organization. And so from my perspective, one of the debacles, in addition to the loss of innocent lives, including American lives, was the incredible chaos that intelligence officers were on the hook to explain to their government. And I realized we were not alone in that. I mean, CIA analysts. When I was in Asia, I was in Northeast Asia and Southeast Asian countries a year and a half after that. And our foreign friends, these were intelligence officers from East Asian countries, said, "You have no idea." They said that was a cataclysm. We felt it like an earthquake, and we're still feeling it. Because everything about the pacing, the hastiness, the deaths, the chaos, the billions of dollars worth of equipment left behind is still reverberating with us. Because when you see the great and powerful USA in that good war, as opposed to, if you remember when Iraq was the bad war, and I think Obama himself said Afghanistan was the good war, run away from that so fast and so catastrophically. This individual said, I leave to your imagination what every terrorist, drug trafficker, human trafficker, weapons trafficker, transnational criminal network, to say nothing of Russia, China, and Iran, made of that retreat. He said, we're still feeling it. I will add parenthetically there that my career was counterterrorism, mostly working against Iran and its proxies. But any of you who are familiar with counter-narcotics might know how much bigger a field that is. I think we figured that the September 11th attacks cost $500,000 for Al-Qaeda to pull off, whereas you're talking tens of billions of dollars from that drug cartels deal with, who have armies and navies and air forces and submarines. And Mexican and Venezuelan and Colombian drug dealers, they're in Kabul, they're in Pakistan. They are a global network that is more terrifying than Al-Qaeda or Hezbollah. However evil they are, they absolutely pale. By the way, I was chief of a targeting branch in my former organization. And when I hired a counter-narcotics targeter to work for me, of course, I told him we do a lot of sensitive things here. It's very compartmented. You're not going to talk about it outside of here. But tell me about yourself. He couldn't tell me what he was doing in narcotics. He said, it's Central Asia. I really can't go beyond that. I'm his top secret cleared boss. He said, no, we have very special programs. I can't talk about it. So in terms of the worlds of analysis and policy not being totally happy with each other, the decision to get out of Afghanistan created bureaucratic chaos, substantive chaos, and rattled our friends, delighted our enemies, and it was completely crazy. That's my first point. Again, I'm being brisk because we want to have dinner. The second point I wanted to make was back in the counterterrorism targeting world, I was looking at Iranian proxies specifically against the very, very nasty Lebanese organization, the most prominent Iranian proxy. And I moved into that space, as they say these days, in a very non-political workforce where people are, they don't have titles, unlike the Department of State. They don't wear a rank here, unlike the military. They're mission-focused people. They work in the field. They work in the big building. And one thing you're always advising your people is don't get demoralized what you see in the paper. Just do good work. Stay mission-focused. You have a problem, come to me. Because people say ridiculous things about us. But I worked against Hezbollah. You've all figured that out. I was in the field when a new boss took over the Iran department. And he was very focused, as to quote him directly, and I can get away with all of this, by the way. I cover color within the lines. He said, what was his number one goal? He said, I want them to experience failure. I want them to be pushed back, and I want them to wake up every day feeling that they're failing and they're being pushed back. There was one individual I'm not naming who was his number one target. And he was this gentleman who took over the Iran department in that agency, inherited a department of very gifted people, but they had been acclimated to supporting the JCPOA negotiations. No surprise, we work for them. We work for the executive branch. So if they're saying, like, what are the negotiating tactics? What are the issues we need to know? What keeps them up at night? So on. Analysts and targeters throw them into answering the questions that they are asked, not the questions they feel like answering. But this person, who is a very rough human being, a very rough personality, was entirely disgusted because he asked them about the individual who he saw as our number one adversary. And they handed him an analytic assessment of the person. And he threw it back at them and he said, I cannot possibly use the colorful language he used. He said, I want the targeting study, not the biography. They didn't have one. And again, I cannot reproduce, at least on half a drink, the language that he responded to them with. But he pulled me back from a field position because I had targeted Hezbollah and he wanted to target this individual. So I have to apologize to Ali and John and to a couple of friends who've heard me say this before. But we had a very tight and small cell of one targeter, one analyst, one psychologist, a branch chief, maybe one other, to start to put together the thing that you would figure out intelligence agencies do. What does our target look like? What are the strengths? What are the vulnerabilities? How does he or she travel? How do they communicate? What does the bench behind them look like? If they were captured, would they be any good to debrief? If they were removed, what would be the impact? So in the course of talking to my colleagues about the target to get smart, I learned that everyone was in love with the idea of supporting an Iran deal and having peace in the valleys between the USA and Iran. I asked about the history of correspondence between the top of the US government and the top of the Iranian government, and I wanted to hear it was brief and unfriendly, and I was told the Valentines have been plentiful and they've all gone in one direction. I was very depressed to hear about that. And I think I only have 1 minute left, so that I will say, despite the headwinds, because politics had infected the workplace a little bit, because there was this understanding of how people who are kept in this building saw what the future should look like, and they were greatly misguided. Anyway, the person is dead. He did not die on the soil of his own country. He was one of the most careful individuals who has ever lived, but his children, his drivers, his bodyguards, his pilots, his colleagues were not as careful as he was. Baruch Hashem. Thank you.